Gentlemen, one of the hardest pills to swallow is this. Sometimes the woman you've given your time, your energy, even your heart to, simply doesn't value you. But here's the truth. Your self-worth is not negotiable. If she doesn't see your value, it's time to detach, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. One of the most difficult things a man can do is face the raw, unfiltered truth of his situation, especially when emotions are involved. When you've invested time, effort, and energy into a woman, when you've shared vulnerable parts of yourself, when you've imagined a future with her, it's incredibly painful to admit that she doesn't see your worth. But that's exactly where you have to start. Detachment begins not with action, but with clarity. It starts in the mind, and the very first step is to accept the reality, not the potential. So many men get caught in the trap of falling in love with what asterisk could be asterisk. They remember the good times, the laughter, the moments of connection, and they let those fragments paint an entire picture of the relationship. They hold on to the highs and conveniently blur out the lows. They tell themselves, she used to be so sweet, or maybe she's just going through something. They explain away the coldness, the disrespect, the dismissiveness. They justify her behavior because they're in love with the idea of her, not the reality of how she treats them. That's a dangerous place to live. You can't build anything meaningful on potential. Potential is a fantasy. It's an idea that lives only in your mind. Reality is what she's showing you right now, through her actions, through her effort, or lack thereof. If she cancels plans repeatedly, barely communicates, or treats you like an option, you have to stop making excuses for it. You have to stop assuming that her behavior is temporary, or that if you love her a little more, she'll magically wake up one day and appreciate you. That's not how it works. People show you who they are all the time. The question is, are you willing to see it? And this is where most men get stuck. They see the red flags. They feel the emotional distance. They know deep down that she doesn't prioritize them, but they keep holding on because they don't want to face the pain of letting go. They tell themselves it's just a phase, that things will go back to how they used to be. But the truth is, the version of her you miss may have never fully existed. Or if it did, it was fleeting, not consistent, not sustainable. You're grieving an illusion, and illusions are powerful because they give us hope. But hope can be toxic when it's rooted in denial. So the first and most vital step in detaching from a woman who doesn't value you is to stop lying to yourself. Strip away the fantasy. Look at the facts. Ask yourself, how does she actually treat me? Not what she says, not what she promises, but what she consistently does. Love isn't just words or chemistry. It's effort, respect, and presence. And if those things are missing, you have to accept that. No amount of waiting, wishing, or working harder will change someone who doesn't see your worth. You can't convince someone to value you. That has to come from them, and if it doesn't, your responsibility is to yourself, not to the version of her you hoped she'd become. Once you accept the reality, you begin to reclaim your power, because now you're not living in emotional limbo. You're not chasing someone who's walking away. You're standing still, grounded, and looking at the situation with open eyes. That's when detachment starts to take root, not in the absence of feelings, but in the presence of truth. And truth, while painful, will always set you free. It's one thing to stop seeing someone, to delete the messages, to clear out the pictures from your phone. But it's something entirely different to stop feeling for them. That's where most men get it wrong. They assume that detachment is just about cutting physical ties. No, more texting, no more hanging out, no more hooking up. And while those things are important, they're not the full story. Because a man can go days, weeks, even months without physically being in contact with a woman, and yet still be deeply, emotionally tethered to her. That invisible cord is what keeps him stuck. He may look like he's moved on from the outside, but inside he's still orbiting around her. And that's why real detachment is not just about cutting off contact. It's about cutting off emotional access. Emotional access is more subtle, but far more powerful. It's the space you give her in your mind. It's the energy she still drains from you without even being present. It's you scrolling through her social media late at night, analyzing her posts, wondering who that guy is in the background of her story. It's you playing detective, trying to decipher the meaning behind a vague caption or a selfie. It's you imagining what she's doing, who she's with, whether she misses you or not. Even though she's not around, she still lives in your head rent-free. That's not detachment. That's obsession in disguise. And here's the catch. Emotional access doesn't always feel toxic at first. It can masquerade as nostalgia, hope, or even closure. You might tell yourself, I'm just curious, or I just want to make sure she's okay. But underneath that is often a silent desire for validation. You want a sign. You want proof that she misses you, that she regrets losing you. That's the ego talking. And the ego, when bruised, will do anything to get reassured, and even if it means keeping you emotionally entangled with someone who has already moved on. What most men don't realize is that detachment is a process of reconditioning. You have to rewire your brain not to seek her out, not to wait for her to come back, not to keep her on a pedestal, because every time you give her that emotional space, you're feeding the very attachment you're trying to break. Even your thoughts about her, especially the ones where you imagine confronting her, proving her wrong, showing her what she lost, are keeping you stuck. It doesn't matter whether the emotions are positive or negative, anger, longing, regret, even revenge. They all mean you're still connected, and connection in any form is still a leash. That's why true detachment demands more than physical space. It requires discipline over your mind. You have to become aware of how often she invades your thoughts, and then make a conscious decision to redirect your focus. And this isn't easy. The brain will reach for comfort, for familiarity. It will try to fill the silence she left behind with fantasy or memory. But you must become the guardian of your own peace. You have to say no again and again to the urge to check up on her, to replay conversations, to wonder about her next move. That's how you take back control. Sometimes this means blocking her, not out of spite, but for your own mental clarity. You might tell yourself you're being mature by keeping the door open, but often that's just another excuse to stay emotionally accessible. Blocking, muting, unfollowing, these aren't acts of cruelty, they're acts of self-respect. You're not trying to hurt her, you're trying to protect yourself, because every digital trace of her, every photo, every like, every story, is a potential trigger. And in the early stages of detachment, you don't need reminders. You need distance. You need silence. You need space to recalibrate your sense of self without her influence. And here's another hard truth. Sometimes you're the one who keeps reopening the wound. You say you're trying to move on, but then you replay the voice notes, scroll through old texts, listen to songs that remind you of her. You indulge in the pain because it keeps you connected, but you have to ask yourself, how badly do you want peace? Because peace comes at a price, and that price is letting go of anything that keeps her emotionally alive in your world. Detachment is not about being cold. It's about creating emotional boundaries where there were none. It's about recognizing that someone who doesn't value you doesn't deserve constant access to your thoughts, your feelings, your mental energy. It's about saying, I don't hate you, but I love myself enough to no longer make you the center of my emotional universe. That's the shift. That's when you go from reacting to choosing, from needing her validation to reclaiming your dignity. And once that internal shift happens, everything else starts to fall into place. When a woman doesn't value you, it often triggers something deep inside, a sense of inadequacy, confusion, or even self-betrayal. And while it's easy to direct all your energy toward her, what she did, how she treated you, why she changed, the real transformative shift happens when you stop focusing on her and start turning inward. Because detachment isn't just about letting go of a woman who doesn't value you. It's about reconnecting with the man you became disconnected from in the process. That man is you, and rebuilding the relationship with yourself is the single most important step you can take. A lot of men don't realize this, but somewhere along the way, whether during the chase, in the relationship, or after the heartbreak, they lost pieces of themselves. They stopped doing the things that made them feel alive. They compromised their time, their boundaries, even their identity, all in an effort to keep her around. Maybe they gave too much. Maybe they put her needs first every time. Maybe they thought that loving her meant sacrificing themselves. But the truth is, every time you prioritize someone who doesn't value you, you send yourself a message, I don't matter as much. And over time, that message seeps into your confidence, your focus, your sense of purpose. Rebuilding that connection with yourself means reversing that damage. It means telling yourself again and again that you are worthy, not because someone else sees it, but because you see it, and that has to start with action. Get back into the routines you once had. If you used to work out, hit the gym harder than ever, not just to get in shape, but to reconnect with your discipline. If you had passions, music, writing, sports, whatever it was, immerse yourself in them. These aren't just hobbies. These are the expressions of your soul. The more time you spend on them, the more you come back home to yourself. A man anchored in purpose is a man that cannot be shaken by the loss of someone who couldn't see his value. But you can't fake this. You can't pretend to be focused on your goals while secretly hoping she'll notice your glow up. That's still giving your power away. True self connection happens when you're doing things for you, not as a performance for her. When you wake up early not to prove something, but because you're excited about building your life again. When you take care of your body not to post it on social media, but because you love how it feels to be strong, focused, and energized. That's the shift. That's when you stop living in response to her and start living in alignment with yourself. Reconnecting with yourself also means taking full accountability, not for the breakup, not for her actions, but for the ways you abandoned your standards. Maybe you tolerated behavior you shouldn't have. Maybe you stayed quiet when you should have spoken up. Maybe you let red flags slide because you were afraid of losing her. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human, but part of rebuilding yourself is being honest about where you betrayed your own instincts. It's not about blaming yourself, it's about learning. Because the man who doesn't learn from his emotional wounds is doomed to repeat them. And the man who takes ownership becomes dangerous, in the best possible way, because he stops needing others to give him what he now provides for himself: love, structure, identity. There's also a spiritual element to this. You need stillness, solitude, Time away from noise and distraction to just be with yourself. Sit in silence, journal your thoughts, reflect without judgment. Ask yourself the hard questions. Who am I without her? What kind of man do I want to be now? What lessons did this pain teach me? These moments of honest reflection are not glamorous, but they are sacred, because it's in the silence that the answers rise to the surface. It's in solitude that your inner voice gets louder, and once you start listening to that voice again, you begin to lead yourself. That's the essence of masculine power, not dominance over others, but command over yourself. And let's not forget your environment. The people around you play a huge role in your self-relationship. If you're surrounded by people who reinforce your pain, your bitterness, or your victimhood, you stay stuck. But if you surround yourself with men who challenge you, who push you, who hold you to a higher standard, you rise. Brotherhood isn't just about comfort. It's about accountability. It's about having someone look you in the eye and say, "You're better than this." When you start slipping back into old patterns, so seek that out, build that circle, because healing in isolation is possible, but healing with the right support is powerful. Rebuilding the relationship with yourself means you stop asking why she didn't value you and start asking how you can show up more fully for yourself every single day. It's not easy. It requires consistency, patience, and a brutal level of honesty. But the reward is undeniable, a sense of strength that no woman can give you and no woman can take away. When you truly rebuild from the inside out, you become a man who doesn't chase value, because he knows he already is the value. And from that place, detachment isn't forced, it's natural. One of the most common traps men fall into when trying to detach from a woman who doesn't value them is the obsessive pursuit of closure. It seems logical, even mature at first. You tell yourself you just need one last conversation, one honest explanation, one moment of clarity where everything suddenly makes sense. You convince yourself that if she could just explain why she changed, why she stopped trying, why she treated you the way she did, then you'd be able to move on in peace. But what most men don't realize is that this craving for closure is often just a disguised form of emotional attachment. It's another way of holding on, because as long as you're waiting for closure, you're still making her responsible for your healing. You have to understand something. Closure isn't something you're owed. It's something you create for yourself. The moment you make peace with the idea that you might never get the answers you want, you begin to take your power back. And ironically, the very fact that she disrespected you, neglected you, or emotionally abandoned you is the closure. Her actions gave you all the information you needed. The lack of consistency, the lack of effort, the cold responses, the broken promises, those are not mysteries to solve, they are messages, and those messages are telling you exactly how much, or how little, you mattered to her. The problem is, you don't want to accept those messages because they hurt, and so instead of facing them, you chase after an explanation that you believe will soften the blow. But here's the hard truth. Even if she did sit you down and give you a perfectly crafted, detailed reason for why things fell apart, it wouldn't satisfy you, because what you're really searching for isn't information, it's validation. You want her to say, you were enough, you were good, it wasn't your fault. You want her to look you in the eye and acknowledge your worth. But if she didn't value you when she had you, why would you expect her to validate you after she's gone? That's not realistic, and continuing to wait for that moment only keeps the wound open. It keeps you emotionally invested in someone who has already shown you that she can live without you. True closure happens the moment you stop needing answers from someone else. It happens when you decide, consciously and deliberately, that her inability to appreciate you says more about her than it does about you. That's the moment you take full ownership of your healing. That's when you say, I don't need her to explain her behavior. I've seen enough. And yes, that takes strength, it takes maturity, but more than anything, it takes self-respect. Because at the root of this desire for closure is often a hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. That she might still come around, that if you handle the breakup with grace, she'll recognize your value and return. But again, that's not closure, that's fantasy. Letting go of the need for closure also means resisting the urge to send that one last text. You know the one. The carefully worded message where you pour your heart out and hope that she responds with equal depth. But what if she doesn't respond at all? What if she reads it and ignores it? What if her reply is cold and detached? Then what? You've just handed her more of your emotional energy, more of your vulnerability, and for what? To be reminded again that she's already moved on. That's not healing. That's self-inflicted pain. Every time you reach out for closure, you give her more power over your peace. You don't need her to say she regrets it. You don't need her to admit she was wrong. What you need is to sit with yourself and acknowledge the pain, not run from it. Grieve it, process it, then release it, not because she gave you permission, but because you decided you deserve better than to stay stuck in emotional limbo. That's when you start detaching at a deeper level. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. You stop crafting hypothetical conversations in your head. You stop measuring your worth by her silence. You begin to understand that healing is not something someone else grants you. It's something you give to yourself, one decision at a time. And sometimes the greatest closure isn't a conversation. It's the silence you choose. The silence where you no longer ask why. The silence where you stop explaining yourself to someone who never asked the right questions. The silence where you no longer feel the need to make her understand. In that silence, you begin to hear something much more powerful, your own voice returning, your own truth getting louder, your own value rising to the surface. And that's when you begin to feel peace, not because she gave it to you, but because you finally stopped chasing her to find it. One of the final and most transformative stages of detaching from a woman who didn't value you is embracing the concept of emotional sovereignty, reclaiming complete control over your peace, your mindset, and your emotional well-being. This means no longer allowing your internal state to be dictated by her presence, her absence, her attention, or her indifference. It means stepping out of the role of the emotionally dependent man who waits, hopes, or reacts based on what she does or doesn't do. Because the moment you realize that your peace is not hers to give or take, you become unshakable. You stop being a slave to emotional volatility and begin mastering the art of internal stability. Too often, men unknowingly hand over the keys to their emotional world to someone who never asked for that responsibility in the first place. They let her mood determine theirs. If she texts, they feel validated. If she doesn't, they spiral into overthinking. If she praises them, they feel worthy. If she criticizes or withdraws, they begin questioning their value. This kind of emotional dependency is subtle, but it's a trap that slowly erodes your power and your self-trust. You end up living in reaction, not intention. And the only way out of that trap is to begin anchoring your emotions internally, through your principles, your actions, and your discipline. Emotional sovereignty starts with awareness. You have to recognize the emotional patterns that are keeping you tied to her. Do you feel a surge of anxiety when you see her online but not engaging with you? Do you feel a drop in energy when you hear she's moved on or seems unbothered? Do you go through emotional highs and lows depending on how she treats you, or whether she acknowledges you at all? These reactions are signs that your emotional state is still tethered to her. And while that's understandable, especially if the relationship was intense or long-term, it's not sustainable if you want to grow. Because as long as someone else holds the switch to your peace, you'll always be at the mercy of circumstances outside your control. Taking your power back doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you become *centered*. It means you stop chasing closure, attention, or revenge, and instead choose emotional discipline. That discipline looks like choosing not to check her social media, not because you're pretending not to care, but because you care about protecting your energy. It looks like deleting old messages or photos, not to erase the past, but to clear emotional clutter from your present. It looks like sitting with the urge to reach out and letting it pass, not because you're playing games, but because you respect yourself too much to reopen a wound that's trying to heal. It also means creating emotional anchors within yourself, habits, routines, and beliefs that ground you no matter what's happening around you. You start your day with purpose, not with checking your phone. You set clear goals and work toward them, not to distract yourself, but because you're building something real, your future. You surround yourself with people who see your worth and challenge you to rise, not those who echo your pain or fuel your bitterness. You develop standards, not just for how others treat you, but for how you treat yourself. That's real power. That's what separates a man who merely survives heartbreak from a man who evolves through it. There's also a shift in how you interpret her actions. When you're still emotionally attached, every move she makes feels personal. If she's cold, you wonder what you did wrong. If she's distant, you think she's punishing you. But once you reclaim your emotional independence, you stop personalizing her behavior. You begin to see that how she treats you is a reflection of her values, not your worth. That's when things get quieter inside. The need to prove, to explain, to be seen, all of it starts to fade, and what replaces it is a deep sense of inner peace rooted in self-respect. Emotional sovereignty also involves forgiveness, not for her necessarily, but for yourself. Forgive yourself for tolerating less than you deserved. Forgive yourself for breaking your own standards in the name of love. Forgive yourself for not seeing the red flags earlier. This isn't about excusing anything. It's about releasing the emotional weight you've been carrying. You can't be sovereign while still shackled by guilt, shame, or regret. Letting go of those emotions doesn't mean you forget. It means you extract the lesson and move forward without dragging the baggage. It means you make a conscious decision to stop punishing yourself for being human, for loving, for hoping, because you're wiser now, and wisdom should be carried like armor, not chains. Eventually, emotional sovereignty becomes your new baseline. You no longer look for signs from her, because you've stopped needing them. You no longer craft scenarios in your head where she comes back, apologizes, or realizes your worth, because you already know your worth. And that knowing doesn't come from her attention, her approval, or even her apology. It comes from you showing up for yourself day after day. That's the true reward of detachment, not numbness, not bitterness, but inner freedom, the kind of freedom where your mood is no longer a hostage, where your energy is no longer hijacked, where your direction is no longer swayed by the unpredictable winds of someone else's presence or absence. When you reach this stage, something beautiful happens. You stop obsessing over what you lost and start appreciating what you've gained: clarity, strength, self-awareness, discipline, peace. And from this place, you're not just free from her. You're free from every situation that ever tried to control you through your emotions. You've taken back the throne. You've become the master of your inner world. And nothing and no one gets to rule that space except you. So in the end, detaching from a woman who didn't value you isn't about bitterness, revenge, or proving a point. It's about choosing yourself, fully, unapologetically, and without hesitation. It's about breaking the cycle of needing external validation and realizing that your peace, your worth, and your future were never hers to hold. The pain you feel now is not your enemy, it's your awakening. Let it push you, shape you, and strengthen you. And when the dust finally settles, you'll look back and realize losing her wasn't the end of you. It was the beginning of the man you were always meant to become.